At first, I thought it was a joke. Rehan always spoke in riddles, as if his life was some private poem I was never meant to fully understand. But that night felt different. Urgent, uncertain. I stared at the message glowing on my screen while the city outside my window hummed with routine night sounds. Rehan wasn't just anyone to me. We had met at a mutual friend's graduation dinner 6 months ago. He had this quiet charisma that pulled people in, never loud, never needy, just present. In a room full of noise, he somehow made silence feel magnetic. Our connection was fast but confusing. We weren't officially together, yet we spoke every day. He never labeled what we were, and I never pushed. I suppose I thought love would eventually name itself if I waited long enough. Still, things weren't always right. He never wanted to meet my friends, never posted me on social media, and often vanished for days with no explanation. But when he was with me, his attention felt whole. That's what kept me tethered. So when he sent that message, "Come alone," my heart skipped. I wanted to believe this was it, a turning point, a real beginning. Maybe he wanted to finally come home and stay. Maybe he needed a gesture of trust. Still, I hesitated. I called Amina, my best friend since college. She was the rational one, the voice that anchored me. When I read the message to her, she didn't even pause. "Something's off." "Why would he say that?" "Why can't I come with you?" she asked. "I don't know. Maybe he wants to talk without judgment. Maybe he's nervous," I reasoned. She sighed. "You're not a therapist, and he's not a mystery you need to solve." But I had already made up my mind. At 10:43 p.m., I grabbed my keys and jacket and stepped into the night. The roads were nearly empty, the streetlights casting soft gold glows on the wet pavement. As I drove, I rehearsed what I'd say when I saw him, how I'd ask the right questions, how I'd tell him I was ready for something real. But beneath all that hope, a quiet fear lingered. What if this wasn't a beginning? What if it was the end disguised as one? My fingers tightened on the steering wheel as I neared the location he'd sent, a lonely side road on the edge of a city. I was alone, just as he'd asked. And he was waiting. Rehan slid into the passenger seat without a word, his hood pulled over his head, and a small backpack clutched in his lap. The air inside the car shifted immediately, heavy, unfamiliar. I waited for a smile, a simple "thank you," even a joke to lighten the tension, but he just stared out the windshield. "You okay?" I finally asked, my voice too soft for the weight in the car. He nodded, barely. "Drive." I pulled away from the curb, glancing at him through the corner of my eye. His jaw was clenched, his expression unreadable. He looked tired, not just physically, but as if something inside him had collapsed. We drove in silence for several minutes. The roads were deserted, just the hum of tires and the rhythmic beat of the wipers as a light drizzle began. I kept my eyes forward, but my mind spun in 100 directions. It wasn't always like this. I remembered how it all started. His voice on the phone at 2 a.m., asking about my day. His hand brushing mine while pretending to point at the stars. The way he once called me home, when we sat in the back seat of a taxi, drenched from unexpected rain. But there were shadows, too. The sudden disappearances. The vague excuses. That one time I saw a text pop up on his phone from someone saved as R. He'd snatched it away before I could react and told me, "You don't need to know everything." Back then, I let it go. Now, his silence was louder than any lie. The smell of perfume clung to his hoodie, floral, expensive, not mine. I didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, I focused on the road, the familiar streets now feeling strangely foreign. "Where were you before this?" Asked finally. He didn't turn to look at me. Nowhere important. I pressed further. "You said if I came alone, you'd come home."
What did you mean by that?
He exhaled slowly, as if choosing words carefully. "I just needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" He didn't answer. The silence returned, this time colder, more final. I swallowed hard, my grip on the wheel tightening. I didn't understand what I was driving toward anymore. Hope? Closure? Or just one more night of pretending? We pulled up to my apartment. He sat still for a moment, eyes on the building as though it held answers. Then, slowly, he opened the door. "You're letting me stay, right?" he asked without looking back. I nodded, even though something inside me screamed no. Because sometimes, love and loneliness sound exactly the same. Rehan stepped into my apartment like a stranger, carefully, slowly, as if crossing a threshold he didn't belong to. I closed the door behind him, locking it with a hesitation I tried to ignore. He dropped his bag beside the couch and sank into it without removing his shoes, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for something to cling to or hide from. I offered tea. He nodded, distracted. In the kitchen, I moved through familiar motions, boiling water, placing cups, pretending this was routine. My hands trembled slightly as I poured. The silence from the living room wasn't peaceful. It was a quiet pact with unspoken things. When I returned, he had taken off his hoodie. His shirt was wrinkled, the collar slightly smudged with lipstick. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. I handed him the tea and sat across from him. He avoided my eyes. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked. "About what?" "Whatever made you send that message. Whatever this is." Rehan sighed, staring into his cup. "It's complicated. It always was." I let the silence stretch. I'd learned that forcing answers from him only pushed him further into a shell. But this time, I couldn't ignore the pit growing in my stomach. His phone vibrated on the table between us. He didn't reach for it. I did. One glance at the screen, and my heart dropped. My world broken heart. "I miss you already. Did you tell her?" My breath caught. I tapped the message, and suddenly the screen lit up with more. Weeks of conversations, voice notes, pictures. Another woman. Another version of Rehan. A whole life parallel to mine. He didn't even flinch. "You were never planning to come back to me," I whispered, blinking through the sting in my eyes. "You just needed a place to stay tonight." He looked at me then, not with guilt, but exhaustion. "It wasn't about you. I just didn't know where else to go." I felt like I'd been punched without warning. "So you used me?" "I thought you could handle it," he muttered. Anger surged up, burning through my sadness. "Handle what? Being your backup plan? Your emotional motel?" He stood suddenly, brushing past me toward his bag. "I didn't come here to fight." "No," I said sharply. "You came here to be sheltered from the consequences of your own choices." He paused, hand on the doorknob. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said. "You meant to hide. That's worse." He didn't reply. The door closed behind him with a quiet finality. And just like that, the truth came home. Not love. The morning after Rehan left, the apartment felt quieter than usual, not peaceful, not calm, just empty. A silence that settled into the walls and the spaces between objects, like it had always been waiting to return. The teacups from last night sat untouched. The imprint of him on the couch had faded. I sat cross-legged on the rug, staring at the soft glow of daylight filtering through the curtains, trying to make sense of what had happened. Not just what he did, but what I had allowed. I didn't cry. Maybe I was too tired. Or maybe, somewhere deep down, I had always known. I just refused to listen to that voice inside me. The one that whispered every time he disappeared, every time I made an excuse for his absence. I reached for my phone and called Amina. She picked up on the first ring. "You were right," I said quietly. She didn't ask for details. She just stayed on the line, breathing with me. Later that day, I started gathering the pieces. The small trinkets he had left behind, his cologne bottle, an old hoodie, a birthday card with no date. I placed them in a box, not with anger, but with closure. These weren't memories anymore. They were lessons in disguise. I stepped out for a walk just before sunset. The air was cool, the street still. It felt good to move, to breathe without waiting for someone else's voice to fill the silence. I passed a small park where kids were chasing each other, laughter echoing through the trees. Life was still happening, unshaken by one person's exit. There was something grounding in that. I found a bench near the fountain and sat down, pulling out my journal. Writing had always helped me untangle emotions when words spoken aloud felt too sharp. For the first time in weeks, My pen moved without hesitation. He said, "If you come alone to pick me up, then I will come home at night." I did. And what returned with me wasn't love. It was truth, cold and uninvited. But maybe that's what I needed. Not the man, not the promise, just the clarity I had been too afraid to seek. I closed the journal, exhaled, and looked up at the sky turning shades of deep orange and gold. There was pain, yes, but there was also relief. Not every love story ends in love. Some end in awareness, in strength, in finally choosing yourself. And this time, I wasn't just alone.